At an Arctic bioresearch station, Hiroshi and Daniel enter a lab and find open animal cages, 2 dead men, and their friend Peter, who is still alive but infected by some disease. When Hiroshi gives him some water, something throbs in Peter's throat and Hiroshi calls it progress. On day 1, a team from the Centers for Disease Control or CDC led by Peter's brother Alan arrives on a helicopter. Hiroshi and Daniel tell them there haven't been any further infections, which means the virus doesn't travel airborne and quarantine isn't needed. The CDC team has a chip injected into their left hand that gives them unrestricted access to all the facilities, and they learn that there's only 1 hour of satellite a day to exchange data with the outer world. Alan and Julia visit Peter, who has been tied up. His vitals are critical and Alan doesn't think he'll survive the night. While Julia takes a blood sample, Alan asks some questions but Peter only answers white room. Julia notices Peter's blood is black, causing him to suddenly break free and push them off before stealing the needle. As Alan holds him down, Julia injects Peter with a sedative. Then Alan, Julia, and Sarah check on the dead bodies only to discover their soft tissue has dissolved into black goo. Meanwhile, Doreen and Sergio examine Peter's lab and find genetically modified mice. Daniel assures them they never used monkeys, which Doreen thinks is strange. Thanks to a special test, she confirms the virus isn't airborne. When Sergio disassembles a drain, Doreen finds fur from a monkey, which means Daniel lied. They start searching the base and find a door that won't open, so they lied about the chips too. Sergio uses liquid nitrogen on the lock to force it open and they find a bunch of empty cages. Doreen recognizes the monkey smell and notices the cages were open from the inside. There's a monkey sneaking around and when Doreen tries to get closer, the animal goes wild and attacks her. Sergio hits it with a metal bar to kill it and Doreen notices something throbbing in its throat. Alan and Sarah search Peter's room and find a USB drive with video diary entries. In the first video, Peter makes a sign with his hand that Alan recognizes as a secret code they had as kids to warn each other about their drunk father. It means run. At that moment, the alarm goes off in the isolation room and they discover Peter escaped through the air duct using a bone saw. Daniel seals the air ducts and floods them with a gas that should disable Peter. Alan volunteers to search the air ducts and soon finds a trail of black goo, which he follows until he discovers the body of a guard missing an arm. While the body is removed from the duct and Alan insists on sealing this part of the base, Julia and Sarah run some tests in the lab. They discover a virus that is only 15 nanometers long, which has never happened before. When they show this to Alan, they explain the virus appears to be mutating Peter's genes. Sergio reveals he's got a miniature satellite dish hiding in his clothing and goes outside to send a message. When he turns around, he discovers hundreds of frozen monkeys. Sergio rushes back to talk to Hiroshi, saying that the people they work for aren't happy and that the schedule for the delivery changed when the CDC showed up. Meanwhile, Peter has put on the guard's uniform and uses the arm to open a lock. Now he can enter a room and attack all the people there. On day 2, Sarah interrogates Drs. Haven, Bryce, and Suleimani. They describe Peter's attack as smothering because he kept putting his mouth against theirs. There were 3 other scientists who ran away. The CDC team concludes Peter will go around looking for more people to infect. One of the missing scientists named Tracy mortality rate. Suddenly, a Narvik bee rat breaks the glass and attacks an uninfected rat by passing the black goo from mouth to mouth. In the corridors, Sergio and Daniel capture one of the missing doctors. He looks very sick and is taken away on a stretcher, which is seen by other workers. They want to know why they haven't been evacuated yet, so Alan explains they can't risk taking the virus to the rest of the world. In the isolation room, Haven is going through severe pain, so Sarah leaves to look for medicine. When she enters the stockroom, Peter suddenly closes the door behind her. He tells her that Julia is here for a reason before escaping through the air duct. Soon Alan, Sergio, and Daniel arrive and Sarah tells them what happened. Sergio finds black fluid in the air duct and thinks Peter left it to be followed. Then Sergio climbs into the duct and looks around until he finds Peter. Alan is keeping an eye on him on the camera and for a few seconds it goes black. When the image returns, he's looking at himself, which means Peter stole the camera and is above him. The security team rescues an unconscious Sergio from the duct, but Peter is already gone. In the isolation room, Sarah notices that medicine has no effect on Haven. Bryce and Suleimani want to get out, and when Sarah refuses to open the door, Bryce threatens her with a syringe. Security is called and Alan decides to enter the isolation room, taking off his suit to gain the doctor's trust. It works and Sarah is freed. Afterward, Julia shows Alan and Sarah her testing on the rats. The Narvik A rats died of liquefaction of their organs, while the Narvik B rats are aggressive. Julia believes that the Narvik B virus reprograms the brain to create a perfect contagion machine like Peter. As Doreen brings Tracy to intensive care, Haven starts having a seizure. When Sarah runs to check on him, he reveals he's only pretending and pushes her against the wall to knock her out. Doreen is pushed into the chamber by Bryce and Suleiman, and the 3 doctors get to escape. Moments later, Sarah discovers her hand is trembling. Alan confronts Hiroshi about all the lies, but he claims he didn't know what his scientists were doing. After Alan leaves, Hiroshi looks at a secret album full of pictures of Julia. Then he takes off his contacts, revealing he has silver eyes. In the shower, Julia is approached by Peter, who tries to kiss her. Julia pushes him off, but Peter grabs her and forces her to swallow the black goo. On day 3, Alan finds Julia unconscious in the bathroom. When he asks what happened, Julia has a flashback of the attack but says she doesn't remember what happened. After Alan drops Julia in her bedroom, he hears a noise and follows it into a lab where he finds Peter, who asks for help before collapsing. The base is put under lockdown while Doreen and Sarah gather all the employees to ask them to report even the smallest symptom. Alan brings Peter into the isolation area but Hiroshi thinks he's too dangerous so he announces they're sending him to level R. It's outside and Sergio uses a drill to take a sample from one of the frozen monkeys. In a corridor, Bryce is trying to force his way through a steel door with a fire axe, calling for someone named Duchamp. As Alan and Daniel surround him, Bryce begins coughing the black goo. He says there's a cure called Sidra behind the steel door and tries to attack Alan, so Daniel brings him down with a taser. While security takes Bryce to level R, Alan knocks on the steel door and Dr. Duchamp shows up to tell him there's no cure. In the lab, Doreen prepares a sample from the frozen monkey but as soon as she puts it in the incubator it grows at shocking speed. She kills it with a gas while explaining viruses aren't supposed to do this. She wants to inform the others, but Sergio convinces her to keep the secret so this won't get cleaned like the other room. Alan mentions the incident to Hiroshi, who explains Sidra is an antiviral that has an almost 100% success rate, including hepatitis and HIV. The problem is that it has a 75% mortality rate. Hiroshi also admits that the base has a store of smallpox. When the tests are ready, all the employees are tested. The negatives are allowed to return to their rooms while the positives are sent to level R. The final result shows almost a third of the base is infected. Meanwhile, Daniel and his men go to move Suleimani and Bryce, but when they open the door, Suleimani tackles Daniel to try to give him the goo. Another guard tases her but the shock only pushes her off and she uses the chance to run away. While the guards go after her, Daniel finds Bryce dead. In level R, Julia notices Sarah slipping and dropping things. She forces her to take the test, which comes out negative. Daniel arrives to tell them about Suleimani and is overheard by an employee, who tells the other patients. Panic ensues and everyone tries to run away. As a crowd gathers in the corridor, Suleimani throws a guard against the wall and begins transferring the goo. Julia coughs as she remembers her own attack and Daniel loses his gun when the crowd pushes him. When Suleimani is about to attack Julia, Alan grabs his gun and shoots her in the head. Then Julia shows Alan that she coughed the goo, so she must stay on level R2. It's decided that level R will be sealed off and Alan wants to call in the army when the satellite is available. In her bedroom, Sarah notices her hand trembling again and takes some medicine. She removes her shirt, revealing a large scar on the spinal column. Outside, someone in an army uniform puts an explosive on the satellite dish. On level R, Julia checks her own test and it still shows negative. Then she checks other positive results and some of them are now negative. This means the test doesn't work, so she tries to call the others. However, the explosive destroys the satellite and internal communications aren't working. On day 4, the scientists on level R make a plan to override the air scrubber system. This will leave the main base with no oxygen in 6 hours, which would force someone to come down. Julia tries to convince them that this is a dangerous plan, but the group kicks her out and leaves her. Suddenly a person in a suit appears in and makes a sign as if asking to follow them, but when Julia tries to do so the person disappears. Alan asks about the satellite and Daniel claims they're investigating. Hiroshi announces that they're abandoning the people on level R because it's too dangerous to reopen it. In her room, Sarah notices her hand is still trembling. When she's about to take some medicine, she's approached by Dr. Igam, who asks about the accuracy of the test. Hers was negative, but she has a strange mark on her arm. Sarah runs the test again and it's still negative, but Igam is skeptical. In the isolation room, Peter is squirming in pain and normal medicine isn't helping. Alan convinces Duchamp to try Sidra, since at this rate Peter is going to die anyway. As soon as Sidra is injected into Peter's body, his condition improves. Meanwhile, Hiroshi calls Sergio out for blowing up the dish. Sergio reveals that Hiroshi made the virus and tells him that if he doesn't want trouble, he must reach the promised results. At that moment an environmental alert announces an oxygen decrease in the base. Daniel explains this is a tactic used to remember being here before. Later Igam begins to have hallucinations and Sarah finally realizes that she's infected, meaning the tests don't work. Igam is an oncologist and can tell Sarah's symptoms indicate she has a tumor, but she agrees to keep it a secret as long as Sarah doesn't tell anyone that she's infected. Afterward Sarah goes to see Alan to tell him that the test doesn't work but there aren't any infected people on that floor. At that moment Peter wakes up and Duchamp discovers the virus is fighting back. Suddenly Peter has a heart attack, so Alan places him under artificial respiration to preserve him until a cure is found. Sarah's body is getting worse but she can't find the regular medicine, so she has to opt for something stronger. Igam is also getting worse so Sarah gives her a strong injection too. Daniel informs Hiroshi that people are starting to feel sick over the lack of clean air, so Hiroshi reveals hidden stairs in his office. They quickly reach the air scrubbers and find the armed scientists ready to fight. One of them is puking black goo so Hiroshi swears to help them. They believe him and turn the scrubbers back on, only for Hiroshi to then take Daniel's gun and kill them. Hiroshi tells Daniel to take the bodies away while he goes looking for Julia. On a corridor, Hiroshi comes across Haven, but he just keeps walking without getting attacked. On day 5, Sergio burns all the frozen monkeys and sends a message to his boss, telling them he finished his mission and asking for evacuation. He gets a message back telling him his new mission is to find Dr. Hvitt. Suddenly the monkeys start screaming because they've been alive after all. Sergio goes to the office and searches Hvitt's name in the system but gets no results. After lots of testing, Alan finds a way to make Sidra stronger and Dusham gets ready to test this update on animals. On level R, Hiroshi makes it look like he was attacked before approaching Julia and Jane, saying the guys messing with the air scrubber stabbed him. They don't have the supplies to help him, so they'll have to cross a dark corridor to reach the other side of the facility. After walking for a while, they stop so Julia can wrap a jacket around Hiroshi's wound and she notices weird scars on his back. Suddenly they see a bunch of rats running, so they throw the flashlight into the tunnel to discover an infected person. The trio immediately starts running too, and Hiroshi and Julia manage to hide inside a room, but Jay is jumped on by the attacker and left outside. Julia wants to save her, however Hiroshi says it's too late and blocks the door. While they wait, Julia asks Hiroshi about his scars, and he explains he tried to save his daughter when his house caught on fire. Once they can't hear the attacker anymore, the duo keeps moving down the corridor, but Hiroshi can barely walk and falls. Haven finds them and tries chasing after them, so Julia pushes Hiroshi into another room where Jay appears and uses a fire extinguisher to knock Haven out. Then the women take care of Hiroshi's wound and Jay says he lied about his daughter, which confuses Julia because Jay hadn't been there. This makes Julia realize Jay is a hallucination and all the things Jay did were actually done by Julia. At the lab, Alan finds Doreen's body and thinks someone pushed the cages on purpose. After an argument, Alan and Daniel check the security cameras, only to discover all the files are corrupted. Once Alan is gone, Daniel checks the other cameras and notices Sergio in the corridor. At the same time, Sergio asks Dusham about Hvitt. Dusham confirms he's in the base but nobody sees him anymore. Rumors say he's in the White Room. Then they're interrupted by Daniel, who takes Sergio to another room to slam him against a wall as he asks about Doreen. Sergio only tells him to ask Hiroshi. Meanwhile, Igam continues to be in pain and asks Sarah to end her suffering. Sarah ignores the request and gives her an injection before getting one for herself. Alan autopsies Doreen and finds the needle mark that killed her, which worries Sergio. Then Alan goes to tell Sarah that Doreen was murdered, which makes Sarah's mood worse. She ends up kissing Alan, but he pulls back and notices her pupils, so he assumes she's been consuming medicine for fun. After he leaves, Sarah finally agrees to grant Igam's wish and euthanizes her with an injection. Sergio and Alan look for Doreen's research to see what's being covered up. Sergio smoothly manipulates Alan into looking for Hvitt, claiming that Doreen was in contact with him. Alan goes to confront Daniel, who points out that Alan shouldn't trust everything Sergio says. Getting suspicious, Alan and Daniel search Sergio's room. They find plastic explosives, the portable satellite dish, Doreen's research, and a message saying he's found Hvitt in the White Room, so evacuation has been scheduled. Hearing this, Daniel runs away. A confused Alan asks Dusham what the White Room is and learns it's an inside joke to refer to the Arctic. Outside, Daniel walks to a hidden spot where he pushes a button, causing several preserved heads to rise from under the snow, including Hvitt's. Suddenly he's knocked down by Sergio, who faked that last message on his phone so Daniel would guide him to this spot. Sergio grabs Hvitt's head and heads back only to bump into Alan, who punches him for killing Doreen. Since he's a soldier, Sergio easily overpowers Alan and cuts his guide rope to abandon him in the snow before leaving. Thankfully, Alan manages to find the rope again and returns to the base too. Meanwhile, Sergio is trying to text his boss, but he's ambushed by Daniel, who stabs him and takes off his insulated clothing. Then Daniel takes Hvitt's head and makes his way back. On day 6, a mysterious person begins dragging Sergio's body away. On level R, Julia sees a little girl in the corridor and tries to follow her, only to bump into Peter. Realizing this isn't real, she checks on the girl again and notices the black goo in her mouth. At that moment she wakes up, confirming her infection is spreading and she's still in the locked room with Hiroshi, whose wound has healed too fast. Outside the door there's a bunch of violent infected people and Julia hears a woman begging for help before passing out. When she wakes up, Hiroshi immediately gives her a sedative to put her to sleep again. Then he sneaks out and after blocking the door, he leaves through one of his secret passages. Back to Alan, he uses some chemicals and fire to burn a hole through the floor so he and Sarah can go down. The door to level R has a simple chain so he starts sawing it, but he's interrupted by a bunch of infected people breaking through the window and reaching through to grab Sarah. Alan saws the guy's hand off to free her and they run back to the base. In a strange house, Sergio wakes up handcuffed to a bed. The mysterious person is Anana, the only peace officer in the local Inuit village. When Sergio tries to reach for some scissors, Anana stomps on his hand and chokes him a little. She asks him what's happening in the base and something about children, but he claims to know nothing. Then Anana shows him the pictures of the 31 children that have disappeared near the base. At the lab, Alan and Sarah discover that the virus is delivering something to the cells. At that moment Hiroshi returns, so Alan shakes him to make him talk. Hiroshi explains that Narvik was created to deliver a cure for all cancers, but someone else modified it into what they see now. After Alan storms off, Daniel tells Hiroshi that he killed Sergio and Hiroshi slaps him for it because if Sergio doesn't check in, they will come. Meanwhile Julia has another hallucination that puts her in a cabin with the girl and Peter. The child is also called Julia and she explains she comes every summer with her mother. Julia realizes this is the place in Montana she visited with her mom and the girl is her younger self. The hallucination changes to a dinner with all her colleagues, who say they're here because of Julia and everything has always been about her. When she cuts the turkey, black goo comes out of it. Then she finally wakes up with silver eyes. Julia doesn't see signs of the infection anymore and her blood looks good, but her head hurts. She also sees Peter in the room, so she covers her eyes to avoid looking at him. He still talks to her, mentioning she may be patient zero. Sarah and Alan run more tests and accidentally make the virus grow. Since it's spreading on the desk, Alan uses a fire extinguisher to stop it. If the cold stops the virus, they theorize it may work on infected humans. Alan visits Dr. Victor, who has cryogenics equipment in his lab that he's been testing on rats. They prepare the machine for Peter and immerse him in the liquid. At first he appears to drown, but soon he calms down and falls asleep. When Sergio is left alone, he grabs a pen and uses its parts to open the handcuffs. After grabbing a knife he looks out and discovers Anana is friends with Daniel. Sergio rushes out and attacks Daniel until Anana stops him with her gun. It turns out this guy isn't Daniel, he's Anana's brother Talyuk. He used to have a twin brother who disappeared when they were kids. Anana wants to know who this Daniel is, so she and Sergio leave to find the base. On day 7 a bunch of helicopters with the Ilaria Corporation logo arrive. Some soldiers enter the base and Constance introduces herself as Ilaria's chief operating officer before claiming she's only here to help Alan. In private she throws a book at Hiroshi and grabs him by the neck for his failure. The original mission was to get a virus and a cure, so she plans to rescue Julia to finish it. Once they have a cure, every witness will be killed. At the same time Alan tells Sarah he doesn't trust Constance, so if they find a cure, they must keep it. Later Constance finds Hiroshi's album of Julia pictures and makes him confess where she's hidden as she takes off her contacts to reveal silver eyes. After she leaves, Hiroshi sneaks into his secret passage. When Sergio and Anana show up at the base, the guards including Daniel receive them. Anana runs to hug Daniel and tells him he's the brother they stole from her. Daniel pushes her off, so she shows him a picture of Talyuk and Sergio supports her story. Thinking it's an edited picture, Daniel sends Sergio to isolation. Constance checks on Sergio and slaps him for killing the scientist who could have found the cure. It turns out Ilaria is paying for the virus and cure, while Constance is paying Sergio for proof that Hiroshi has gone rogue. After hitting Sergio again, she kisses him. She still has to pretend she's Alan's ally. She sends Sergio to isolation anyway. On level R, an infected person breaks into Julia's room and tries to attack her. However, Julia's new eyes flash silver and scare the creature away. Soon Hiroshi arrives and is shocked to see Julia's silver eyes, so he bandages them while he cries. Then he convinces her to leave the room because someone is coming to kill her. Alan, Constance, and the soldiers make it to level R and encounter some crazy infected people. The soldiers open fire, but there are too many of them and they can't fight them all. Constance calls for a full retreat and the group runs as they keep losing more soldiers on the way. They manage to get behind a gate for safety, yet Alan refuses to leave without Julia. An infected person appears in the corridor and almost attacks Constance, but Alan shoots her first. Constance thanks him but still threatens Alan to force him to leave with her. Meanwhile Daniel hears Anana's story about all the missing kids. He admits there used to be children at the base but they all disappeared and he doesn't know what happened to them. When Hiroshi comes back with Julia, Daniel and Anana are waiting for him. Daniel makes the guards take Julia away and Hiroshi gives her a box before she leaves. Once she's alone in a lab, Julia opens the box and finds contacts. She doesn't put them on, so when Alan finds her, he notices the silver. On day 8, infected people begin breaking through the ceiling to invade the base. They sneak through the ducts and spy on everyone. Julia tells Alan and Sarah that they have to run some tests on her blood to find the cure. At that moment an alarm goes off and Alan joins Daniel to find an infected man that the guards killed. Alan notices there's black goo all over the supplies and thinks the man came here on purpose to contaminate their food. Sarah takes a blood sample from Julia and notices she's got light sensitivity. Julia asks her to keep the secret and takes off her contacts. In the meantime Daniel gives Anana a uniform so she can pretend to be an employee. She checks on Sergio and stitches his wound while asking for help finding records on the missing children. Sergio refuses and mentions all the horrible things he's done to make her mad. Anana storms off and accidentally leaves the needle in the wound, so now Sergio can use it to pick the handcuff lock. At the entrance, Anana says goodbye to Daniel and gives him a family picture before leaving. Constance checks on Julia, grabbing her face to take a look at the silver eyes. Alan also arrives but the guards don't let him enter Julia's room. When Constance comes out, she announces Julia is now the property of the Ilaria Corporation and if Alan tries anything, he'll be shot. Afterward, Constance interrogates Hiroshi, wanting to know how he gave Julia the silver eyes. When he refuses to talk, Constance threatens to torture Julia. Alan is sent back to the lab and Sarah tells him she has found no cure in Julia's blood. He responds by asking for chemicals to create a big explosion. When Julia hears people moving in the ducts, she decides to climb in there too. Soon she's surrounded by infected people, who look at her and keep moving without attacking her. Julia keeps crawling too and makes it to the lab, where Alan and Sarah tell her to free Hiroshi so he can retake the base when they kill Constance. After Julia leaves, Alan calls Constance to the lab, claiming they've found a cure. When she's about to get close to a booby-trapped microscope, a guard notices the scientists sharing glances and tackles Constance as the microscope explodes. Alan and Sarah use the chance to run away and hide in another lab. At that moment, Constance talks through the speakers, announcing she'll kill Peter if Alan doesn't come out. Sarah finds a sound cannon in the room and thinks they can use it as a distraction. Outside the base, Anana finds Sergio trying to steal her snowmobile. She tackles him to the ground and they start fighting. Anana overpowers him, but Sergio manages to grab the gun and keys. At that moment, some guards show up, so Sergio gives the things back to Anana to allow her to escape while he lets the guards arrest him. In the office, Julia jumps out of the ducts and releases Hiroshi, who immediately sedates her again. Moments later, she wakes up with a torn photograph showing Hiroshi and her younger self. The guards find her and capture her. Alan turns himself in, but Constance still drains Peter's cryogenic suit and orders the guards to kill Alan. At that moment, Sarah uses the sonic cannon on the guards and the power goes out. Some infected men fall from the ceiling and bring down the rest of the guards. Sarah keeps on using the cannon on Constance and the guard trying to capture her. Hiroshi makes use of the darkness to rescue Alan while Sarah runs away. The infected men take Peter's body and escape through the ducts. Hiroshi takes Alan and Julia to his office, only to discover Julia is gone. Meanwhile, Daniel informs Constance that the power box had goo, which means it was cut by the infected men. He overhears a guard announcing Julia has been captured and they'll be evacuating in an hour. Daniel rushes to the office to drop this information, so Hiroshi asks Alan to rescue Julia while he takes care of Constance. The guards muzzle and tie up Julia before putting her inside a box. Hiroshi goes to see Constance and they start arguing about the past, revealing they used to date. Constance calls Julia an abomination and Hiroshi's daughter. Their fight becomes physical and Hiroshi quickly overpowers Constance to finally kill her. Afterward, Hiroshi announces on the speakers that the Ilaria Corporation is no longer in control of the base. Alan and Sarah rescue Julia while Daniel and his men capture Constance's guards. Later, Daniel tells Hiroshi that he'll never forgive him for kidnapping him as a kid and uses his real name to refer to himself. Hiroshi grabs Constance's head and adds it to the collection of frozen heads in the snow. Day 9, Sarah is walking down a corridor when suddenly an infected man starts chasing her. She reaches a metal gate and hides behind it while Daniel's men capture the creature, revealing Sarah has been acting as bait so the team can clean up level R. Alan thinks it's strange they've only seen a few infected ones and around 50 are missing, so Daniel finally tells him that under level R is secret level X, where they keep all their virus samples. Everyone returns to the office and Hiroshi admits he created an apocalypse virus for Ilaria, but he insists the mutation wasn't his work. He also points out Ilaria will send an army next. Julia asks Hiroshi about the picture and he says he used to know her mother, so he would visit her in Montana sometimes. Daniel accesses the cameras on level X and discovers the area is full of infected people. They're spitting goo in a cup and feed it to Peter, who wakes up feeling stronger. Meanwhile, Constance's guard is taken to the cell and he tells Sergio that some men had orders to burn down Anana's village. Later, Victor shows Alan that his machine can put an infected person to sleep at -40 degrees, but he doesn't have enough gas for a whole floor. Alan realizes they can use the Arctic itself for their plan. Hiroshi and Sarah turn off the power while Daniel goes around handing out thermal blankets to other employees. With the power out, Sergio can pick the cell lock and escape. Constance's guard tries to do the same but Sergio beats him up to steal his things. Alan and Julia go down to level X and confirm that since the heater is on, the infected people are now frozen. They carefully move among the bodies and reach the chamber with the virus samples. They have more samples than the CDC and Julia doesn't want Ilaria to keep them, so they start incinerating them all while noticing that Narvik is missing. At that moment, Sarah begins having a seizure, so Hiroshi has to turn the power back on to help her. On level X, the infected people begin waking up, so Alan and Julia need to leave. Since they're still half frozen, the infected ones lack the strength to attack properly and Alan only gets pulled a few times before he makes it to the exit with Julia. On their way to the stairs, Julia notices her initials carved next to a trapdoor and convinces Alan to go down there. To her shock, she discovers an exact replica of the cabin she grew up in. The duo leaves the cabin and discovers Peter has opened the door to surround them with infected people. Julia acts as a shield to keep them at bay with her silver eyes, so she and Alan get to escape through the stairs. Meanwhile, Daniel finds the dead guard, so he rushes outside to stop Sergio from escaping. However, when Sergio tells him what will happen to the village, Daniel agrees to help. They leave on the snowmobiles but lose the trail mid-journey. Thankfully, Anana finds them and guides them to her home. At the village they find the Ilaria soldiers loading up the civilians into a trailer to burn them later. Sergio gets close by pretending to be an officer who arrested Anana and claims Daniel works for a base. On day 10, Sarah is put into an MRI to scan her tumor and she starts hallucinating, thinking the infected people are bursting into the room. Alan snaps her out of it and informs her the tumor is spreading to her brain. Later Hiroshi finds footage of Victor leaving with the Norvik. He thinks he'll just die in the cold, but Alan and Julia look at a map and discover there's an abandoned base 50 miles away. Thinking it may have a working radio, Alan and Julia leave for that base on a snow truck. Eventually Alan and Julia make it to the abandoned base and find Victor trying to contact Ilaria. The duo fails to make him see reason and Victor attacks them, slashing Julia with his axe. Alan quickly grabs him and throws him through a window to win the fight. While he ties Victor up, Julia tries to fix the radio. Suddenly a laser light appears on Victor's chest and he gets shot. Alan and Julia rush to hide while the shooter keeps on firing and asking for the virus. After a bullet destroys the radio, the duo carefully sneaks around and finds a trapdoor. They go down there with Victor's bag and follow a singing voice to find a man with silver eyes chained to a wall. He explains that Constance forced him to pick a side and Hiroshi locked him up 29 years ago. There can only be 500 people with silver eyes, which apparently grant them eternal life. They can hear the shooter coming, so Alan hides the bag with the virus. When Julia tries to free the prisoner, the man fights her for the tool. He explains eternal life equals suffering and watching your loved ones die, so he wants Julia to end things. The tool closes on his neck, killing him. At that moment the shooter finds them and ties them up, threatening to kill them if they don't give him the virus. Suddenly the soldier falls dead of a shot by Daniel, who has been following him because this was the guy that escaped from the village. Afterward the group burns the base and Julia throws the bag with the virus into the flames. At the base Sarah records a video explaining she's been studying Julia's genes and discovered they've restored to the lengths found in a newborn. She's going to creature a serum and test it on her own cancer, so she's recording this in case she's dead when Alan comes back. When the testing begins, Sarah has a seizure and collapses. When the others return, Hiroshi explains he had to put Sarah into a coma to stop the seizures. Julia asks about the prisoner and Hiroshi tells her the guy gave Jane to Constance. The 500 immortals are the people running Ilaria and Hiroshi's always lied to protect Julia from them. Suddenly Sarah crashes and everyone rushes to resuscitate her, but she only has a few hours left. Meanwhile Julia reveals she didn't destroy the virus, she hid the sample in her jacket. On day 11, Hiroshi notices that Constance's phone receives a text saying a retrieval team will arrive in 6 hours. Hiroshi grabs the bombs he keeps hidden in his office and starts planting them around the whole base. The infected ones don't attack him so he puts a bomb on level X2, tackles Daniel to save him from the explosion. This was a distraction and now 3 soldiers are dropping from the sky with parachutes to infiltrate the base. The team runs to hide in the fake cabin and a wounded Hiroshi wants to detonate the bombs now because the leader of the soldiers is Scythe, a skillful assassin and the worst of the silver-eyed immortals. Scythe and his guards get in an elevator and pretend to save all the people from the bunker, but they kill them instead. When Sarah has another headache, her eyes turn silver too. Daniel gets tired of waiting and uses the detonator, but nothing happens because Scythe's guards are disabling them. Scythe reports to his bosses, who tell him to find and deliver the virus, the cure, and Hiroshi alive. Everyone else must be killed. The men sneak out of the cabin to check on the survivors and find the bodies. Then they check the security footage and Alan is shocked to notice Scythe as a teenager, but Hiroshi reminds him he's an immortal silver eye and actually centuries old. Scythe sees the group on the cameras too while one of his guards takes care of something moving in a box. The other guard Blake finds footage of Constance's death and Scythe gets angry because she was his mother. Since Alan and Hiroshi discuss their plan aloud, Scythe hears them on the cameras and doesn't realize it's a trap. While the alarm announces a biohazard accident that the team started as a distraction, Hiroshi and Alan go outside to retrieve a frozen canister. Scythe and his guards surround them, so Hiroshi throws the canister over thin ice. When the guard runs to grab it, the ice cracks and she drowns. By the time Hiroshi and Alan grab their guns, Scythe and Blake are gone. At the base Scythe watches more footage and learns that Hiroshi has a daughter. He kisses Blake and sends her out to find more information about Hiroshi's kid. Meanwhile Alan's team takes the elevator to return to the cabin, but it suddenly freezes when the power goes out. In just a few seconds the lights return and the team discovers Julia is gone. The elevator's ceiling hatch is open so they assume Scythe captured her. The team returns to the cabin, where a canister is dropped down the stairs. Inside they find Julia's finger and a note from Scythe asking for Julia gives Alan one of the canisters and kicks him off the helicopter before it takes off. On day 235 Alan secretly meets with Peter, who says he's found Julia. In the Ilaria headquarters, Julia is in charge of the Board of Silver Eyes. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this.